right. Well, hello. My name is Jenny McFarland. I'm the one of the coordinators for the Arizona Important Bird Areas program, and we are going to be talking today about data entry into the Arizona Important Bird Areas database system. So, first, you'd have to do, if you're someone who's volunteered to be a database enterer, you would need a username and login and like a password. So you're going to get that information from the coordinator. So myself, you did reach out to me, or Tice Saplee at Audubon, Arizona. Either of us could get you set up with a username and password. And then from there, you will have the access to enter data. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to do data entry. And then we'll also talk about where that data ends up, which is kind of an interesting situation as well. So once you have your username and password and you have data, physical data that's been sent to you by a coordinator, this is data that's been collected by volunteers or staff that go out and physically do bird surveys. It tends to look like this. It's got a cover sheet, and we'll go over the specifics of exactly how to interpret those documents. So when you're ready to do data entry, what you're going to do is go on a browser. So this all can happen online. Our database system does have a web interface, which is really nice. You don't have to sit there at a specific computer and do data entry. You can go do it through the web. So you go to aziba.org. So that is the main website of the Arizona Important Bird Areas program. On the main menu here at the top, you're going to go to database. And from there, it's got a bunch of links to queries. That's for people to view data. If you go to the very bottom, there's Arizona IBA bird survey data entry. So you're going to click on that. You're going to log in with that information that you received for your login information. Okay. Enter it. And this is what it looks like. So this is the main hub of the database, and as well as querying system too. So when you do queries on those query links, some of this information is available, and it looks like this. The stuff that's not password protected pops up here. So this is custom built. So this was a sort of HTML custom built for the Arizona IBA program by a volunteer we have who's really talented tech volunteer. He's great, and his name's Jesse Bango, and does a fantastic job. And he keeps this current for us and is just a total asset. So because all this data is ending up in an Access database. So Access is a program that has been around forever from Microsoft. It's one of those programs that always came with Microsoft computers, but many people didn't use it or even know it was there. It's one of those programs. And it's not a super flashy program. It's pretty user-friendly for a database program, but database programs themselves tend to not be all that user-friendly. So they're basically sort of more advanced versions of Excel. Excel is a spreadsheet program, not a database program. Database programs basically let you take Excel spreadsheets, sort of like spreadsheets like Excel, and then have them all linked together, which can be a little challenging on an interface, trying to utilize it. But web interfaces like this make it a lot easier. But it does have the logic of an Access database. So, and I'll explain what I mean by that. You have to go through data entry in a series of steps. And once at the end, when we take a brief look at that database, you'll see sort of what those steps, how they're manifesting in the database. Okay, so I have here some sample data. So this is a scan of like one of the packets I sent out. And every single survey, always any survey that was done correctly, where they filled out the data sheets correctly. Now, before I send data out to be entered by volunteers, I do review data. So I do look at it pretty closely to make sure that they haven't done anything too crazy on it, or if things seem confusing to me, I will indicate that with a red pen. So every packet I sent out to you guys had a red pen, had some red pens in there. And that's why if you need to change anything on a data form, or you want to indicate anything on a data form, I always do that in a red pen. So when the data comes back, because we do archive all this paper data, when that data comes back, we know that that note that was written didn't happen in the field by a surveyor, but that it happened by a data enterer. So every single packet should have like every survey occurrence should have a cover sheet. So people who do data and data collection in the field go through training as well. And this is how I train them to do it. It doesn't always happen perfectly, but I do tend to go through it and sort of fix it myself if they didn't do it quite right. So here's an example. So here's a cover sheet saying that they were in the San Rafael, Route 5. This was the date they were there. These are the people who were there. This is the transect name. Now, this can get a little hairy when you have multiple surveys happening in a morning from one team. But basically, the cover sheet is going to be the page that goes on that packet, that team's packet of data that is saying this is who was there, where we were, and when we were there. That's the main thing. And if they do record any weather data, this is where it goes as well. Okay, so this cover sheet is universal, which is why we call it that, and it should be on every single type of data. Every packet should have one of these. So one of the examples, so I'm sort of looking through this packet, seeing what's here, and so they had a cover sheet, and then it looks like and the name of the survey is always sort of at the top as well, because I print these for people to use. So this is a 200-meter transect, and then they did a point count. Now, I organized the survey so I know what was going on. Each team was given a series of tasks to do. So one cover sheet for all these different little sort of mini surveys they did throughout the morning. Then they did another point count, and they did another point count, and they filled this in with which point count, the time, start and stop. They did another point count. Then they did some stuff that we're going to ignore, stuff that's too specific. But then they did another transect. They did a 6-minute point count. So point counts, transects, and censuses is what we're going to be entering here into this database. And then a point count. Anyway, so it's just sort of flipping through this packet. This is what's in here. They have pretty nice handwriting. That's pretty great. If they didn't know the code, they did something that I really encourage them to do when I train them, is they put sparrow spus. They put more letters if they didn't know what the code was. That's something I always try to tell them to do, because a 4-letter code that's written incorrectly is really not the most helpful thing in the world. That's for sure. Okay, so where is mine? Sorry, let me get my other sample of data that I downloaded. Rotate. Rotate. Okay. So I think we'll probably start with this data first, which is everyone who got their packet should have something similar to this. It's going to be something either from Tankerverde Loop or let's just open an Acrobat, or it'll be either something from 7B or Tankerverde Loop. And the reason I did one of those for everyone is they're very, very similar, conceptually very similar. And this is sort of the most common type of survey that we get. Why is this not open? Just open. So just those of you who have your packets, do you have one either from 7B or from either should say 7B or Tankerverde Loop, or one of those Tankerverde
I got
ones?
TV Loop.
Okay. Yeah, those are good. So these are going to be transects. So there's there's actually 2 main types of surveys that happen, and that is going to be either a point count or a transect. Now, most of the data I have sort of backlogged is transects, because for many years we focused on transects as sort of kind of the most intuitive survey that people would do. And how those work is they are basically you're walking a route and you're sort of like birding a trail and recording everything that you see and see along the way. So kind of like a hiking transect, you're walking a particular route. So there we go. Okay, spin. Okay, so we're going to do a sample of 7B. Okay, so 7B and Tankerverde, if you have a 7B or a Tankerverde, these are incredibly similar situations where these were transects that were done. where a team of people, in this case, 2, in this example here, walked a preset route and recorded all the data they had. Okay, so how we're going to do this, if this is the packet we have in front of us, we're ready to do data entry, you go through a series of steps, and the steps follow the data forms really nicely, like really closely. There was a big attempt to put logic into this system. So from our survey data entry page, the main links here that have to do with entering data are all blue. Well, they're not all blue. There's some weird survey ones at the bottom. I think all the blue links are stuff that's password protected. I think that's what it is. So the fact that some of these queries at the bottom are blue means that you have to have a password and username to use them. But it's these first half of these on the left here are the data entry links, and they go in the order in which you would use them. Okay, so it's pretty well thought out. So I also have shared a folder with all of you of resources. In fact, let me show that real quick because I just want to say this real quick so I don't forget. So I did a Google folder of resources, and right now, currently, it has 2 links in it, 2 documents in it. One of them is a document of 4-letter codes. I copied this all from an old Word document I had, so it didn't format perfectly. I'll toy with it a little bit, but this one is a good reference on 4-letter codes. Now, when I made this document back in probably like 2012, there were very few resources on the 4-letter codes of birds. And so how this tends to work is it's really common, and this comes from banding. It's really common for bird researchers and people doing data to do 4-letter codes. Now, not everybody does. Some people just do sort of regular abbreviations like NCARD for Northern Cardinal. But 4-letter codes are standardized, and they're banding codes. They were used back, they still are used to put little tiny names on little bird bands to put on birds' legs. So they couldn't put the whole name, so the 4-letter codes were born. They tend to follow the really simple pattern of if it's a 2-word name of a bird, which most of them are. So in this example, American bittern, they do the first 2 letters of the first word and the first 2 letters of the second word. That is how nearly all of them work. So American bittern is AMBI. Mourning dove is MODO. So that's 80% of them work that way. Now, when there's a conflict, if 2 birds have the same 2 letters, so cactus wren versus canyon wren, that's where things can run off the rails a little bit, where then they have to be unique codes. So canyon wren is CANW. So then it starts breaking that pattern just so they don't overlap. So canyon wren CANW, cactus wren is CACW. Now, this does not always.
So Carolina wren might be CAWR.
I'm sorry?
The Carolina wren might be CAWR then.
Yeah, it might be. I bet it is. Yeah. So and then there's some that don't make any sense. So like one of my favorite ones to pull out, let me see if I can find it, is black-throated gray warbler. Take a guess. What's black-throated gray warbler? Oh, well, here it is. No, that's blue. Black-throated blue. Black-throated gray. So black-throated blue is BTBW. Black-throated gray is BTYW. BTYW? Are you kidding me? Why is there a Y in there? So anyway, the 4-letter codes can be a little, like 85% of the time, they're exactly what you would expect, but every now and then they're not. And that's the sort of thing that people will fall for too when they're doing their data, is they might put like CAWR thinking canyon wren or cactus wren, and they don't think about the fact there's another bird that has would have the same code if you did it that way. So I do train them on this, or I tell them to, if you're not totally sure on the code, put in some extra letters, They don't always do it though. So that's one of the things I look for when I review data. Now, there's a new resource that was not around when I first made this list, and that is the fact that 4-letter codes are in some of the apps. So like the Sibley app, when you go to any of those birds, you may note it. You may not have noticed it, but when you look up, cactus wren, in the corner of the page on cactus wren in the app is the 4-letter code. So some of the apps now do this. And another thing I have in the folder here is this document I cut and pasted it from an old Word document, so I'll add to it. But this is sort of what I used to provide in the past, is a note about data entry. And so this is some sort of like the process. So if you don't remember how to do something after we talk here, this is a really good reference to go through and be like, oh yeah, okay, I remember this now. So that's what this is for. And I'm going to be adding to this, now, now in modern times, since I created this document several years ago. and I've now made an online version of it, which is great because then the link, as I update it, the link will still always be the most current version. Okay, so that's what's in this resources folder. All right, so back to our data example. I want this data example. Okay, so 7B. 7B is a really cool area near Mammoth, if you've ever, and that's why they wrote Mammoth here. So I was on this survey. This was me and Olia, who also works at Tucson Audubon, doing this survey. So I know exactly what was going on here, which I think is why it makes it a good example of what to do. And so 7B is the name of a ranch on Mammoth. It does have a trail that's open to the public. It's a really cool area, actually. It's a place we've done a lot of Lucy's warbler work. But what this one is saying, what this cover sheet is telling you, is there's a date, there's so survey location is more of a general area. Like we were in San Rafael Grasslands, we were in Las Ciénegas. It's sort of kind of a general area. And then this transect name option here, it should be the exact survey. So the day I did this survey with Olia doing T2, so transect 2, there was another team doing T1. So we had 4 people out there that morning, but there was 2 different survey packets that were turned in at the end because we each did our own, each team of 2 did their own survey. So that's why you have a general survey location and then a specific transect name, because you can have multiple teams out at once in a general area. And so then, of course, who was there? Jenny McFarland and Olia Weekly. We did take weather, and there is a site comment. It's a great example one because everything's filled out, which is not always the case. So the first step on survey data entry is going to be basically that cover sheet, most of what's on the cover sheet. So what you do is we're on our first link here. Now this defaults to this, but if you wander somewhere else, the first link, main survey data entry edit. So main survey is sort of the main information. You're going to select the location. This is all these drawdown tables are because this online system is sort of speaking to the database that lives in a computer here at Tucson Audubon. So there's tables of all the locations and we can pull from it, which means we can add new locations if we ever need to. Okay, so, but this is a long established one, and here it is, 7B property. Okay, and then we have to pick a site. So this is also being fed to the online system from the database. And everything that's associated with 7B will now show up in this site. So what this is referring to is on the cover sheet here, transect name, or like the name of the route, the name of the survey that happened. So up here's the name of the location, the general area. This is the name of the survey. So you go down here. Okay, so we picked 7B, and then all the ones that are associated with 7B will arrive. Now, if we picked a different one, let's say we did 3 links, different routes show up because they're linked together. And this is what Access does. It lets you link things. That's why it's such a powerful program. All right, so 7B has these ones associated. It's like, okay, wait, what was the name of that route? What did they do? So they did 7B T2, and we did a transect. So that when you're looking at these pull downs, it gives you a sense of sort of what's been established at that area. So there is an AS1, so that's an area search. And we do tend to put these longer descriptions so that we can keep track of what everything is. Every single location is going to have also a casual observation pull down option. And that just means if people see a bird, casual means data that was generated when they were not doing an official survey. Maybe they were there doing a work day, doing some habitat work, and they saw a really cool bird and they want to keep a record of it. That's a casual observation. Supplemental are birds that occurred after the end of the survey or were somehow not really like considered in for the survey. So maybe they were too far away, or they happened after the end time or before the start time. So supplemental literally means they're like maybe additional species that are cool that were seen on the way back, but the survey had already ended. So they're not officially part of the data set, they're supplemental. So that's what that's for. And then these are all the actual surveys. So there's a T1 transect, but then there's a T1 transect point count 1. This is pretty common to see in the IBA system, where at some point someone established a transect, and then maybe at the start, end, and the middle point, they had a point count, where you stand on one location and do a survey for 5 minutes usually. So sometimes projects focus on doing the whole transect. Sometimes they focus on doing those individual point counts, but it's pretty common to see both in a pull down. Now, in our case here, they did these two, Jenny and Olia, did a transect, and that transect is called T2. So we're going to go to 7B, and it is T2. Now we got to make sure it says transect and not one of these point count ones, but here it is. 7B T2. Click. That's the right one. All right. Now, another thing this system does that's, I think, very helpful and very cool is because I have logged in as myself, and when you log in as yourself, this will customize for you as well, is the system shows me surveys that I, not anybody, that only I in my login have entered for this location. So in the past, I have entered a 7B T2 for from 2010, and I entered one from 2021. But if you were to enter one, it would only show up on yours, not on mine. And this is the reason we do it this way, is because there's this option to edit. And we don't want people editing other people's stuff by accident, basically, is why it only shows you your records. Okay. So this is 2 right now, because these are 2 I entered in the past. After we do this step, it'll be 3. So let's watch this. So how many observers were there? You just sort of fill it in, and all this information is on the cover sheet. What was that date again? It was April 27, 2022, 04/27/2. Start time, again, on the cover sheet, 6:01. Oh, good. We didn't put the end in. 6:01. Now, they forgot to write the end time, but it's probably on the last page. It's often what they do. Oh no, we didn't write the end time. This is where you write it in a red pen or something like that. Because I was here for this. When did we end this one? This is going to be a sample anyway, so I could probably look this up. I think we did an eBird list too when we were out there. Oh, how did the end
so Jenny?
Oh no, here it is. Maybe. Oh no, she wrote it for the weather. So because she wrote weather 7:37, that's going to be our end time. She just forgot to write it further up. Yes, I have a question.
Well, if you said this would be a time for a red pen, are you saying that we would just like put a question mark there if there was no end time, or we would assume one, or?
Yeah, you could indicate that you had to leave it blank because you didn't know. Or what I would do is, because I've now realized that she wrote the end time here in the weather, I would write 7:37 up here, but in red.
Gotcha. But I mean, like if it wasn't there at all, I wasn't understanding if you wanted us to just like put a question mark there that something was missing. And then of course that would be left blank on the in the database.
That's a very good use of the red pen, is indicating that there was missing information. But also if you've sort of like made a series of assumptions that are very valid, but you want to indicate that, like I just did, like, okay, if she wrote end time, the weather for the end time, that's got to be the end time for the survey too. So I would then write it 7:37 in red pen. Okay, so then Olia also has a comment here that says blooming mesquites. All right, so back to our survey. So 7:38, is that what it was? It was 7:38. No, 7:37. All right. Now, there's this weird thing that happens in the IBA database system. You can tell some of this stuff was designed like back in like 2008, which some of it was. There's these pull downs of primary habitat and secondary habitat. Now, looking at this, these are almost never filled out because, so this is where it would be primary habitat, secondary habitat. These are almost never filled out because it doesn't make any sense. It's weird. It doesn't make any sense to have a surveyor deciding what the habitat is. That should be sort of preset. So almost always this just gets left blank, primary habitat. Every now and then people fill it out, but it's almost always blank, and just leave it blank. That's fine. Now this is where they can write, this is where you can enter in a comment that they wrote on the cover sheet. So on the cover sheet here, she wrote blooming mesquites. So we're just going to type exactly that. And that's what that's meant for. It's supposed to be like a comment about the survey day. And later on, they have option to write comments about specific bird sightings. And we'll talk about how to handle that too. All right, so now we're going to hit save survey record. And look, now there's 3. The one I just entered is right here. 4, and it's at the top. The newest ones go to the top. 4/27/22. Here's my comment. And if you're like, oh, shoot, I made a mistake, you could hit edit and update something and then hit update or cancel. Okay, so it does give you the option to make a change if you need to. All right, so I'm going to cancel, but there it is. So there's the one I just did. Okay, so now Access as a program doesn't really have a save option the way like Microsoft Word does or something. Once you've entered something, it like, and you've sort of entered it and clicked to the next cell, it like auto saves. And this system works the same way because it's sort of interfacing with Access. So now this goes blank, and our only confirmation that it saved it is that it's down here below. Okay, which is great to have that confirmation, and we can edit it. Okay, so what you do next is you literally go to this next step on this list on the left here. So this big menu on the left here, you're going through a series of steps on this. So you do enter, edit, observers, and weather. Now what you have to do is Access is one of those programs where it only knows exactly what you tell it. It does not assume anything for very good reasons that have to do with databases. It does not assume, you have to tell it. So now we're going to tell it, okay, 7B. And it's like, oh, 7B, okay. This is the last one that you, as your login, did for 7B. Okay, so 7B, T2, let's double check the date's correct. When you have the right one, if you're doing this in a series of steps, it should be the top one. We're going to select it. It makes it very clear that it's selected by making it bright yellow. It's like, okay, yes, for this survey now, tell me information is what the database is asking you, or how this interface works. It's like, okay, for this place, I have an observer. So back to that cover sheet, who are the observers? Jenny and Olia. So now this does work. And so there's Jenny. Insert. It's Olia. Olia's last name changed. Is she even in here? She should be in here. Okay. This happens so much. And this is another unfortunate thing from the database design that happened, 15 years ago, is the way it has these tables linked is really weird. So this will often happen where the other people may not show up or the other person isn't there, that kind of thing. Well, Olia really should be in here. What's Olia's maiden name? Yeah, anyway. So if the person isn't there, you're just going to do unknown person. That's what I've added unknown person as a placeholder. Then you can hit insert, and that's something that I can swap out later. Okay, so look, it just does it as question marks. Okay.
So what would we do to make sure that you need to swap that out? Do you know what I mean?
Put a note in red on the cover sheet.
Okay.
Yeah, use that red pen to be like, you circle Olia's name, be like not available or something.
Cool.
Yeah, that's how we do it. And another thing I've been thinking of is back on this main record page here is when you're doing the data entry, the cover sheet part, that sort of where they were and when is, so this is the one that we're working on, is making it sort of a comment thing. So I'm playing with this idea of just putting in the names of the people here and then skipping the pull down part, because it's been such a problem with so many people not being available. Like, it's a really weird system how it works, and I can show you later, but it's super weird. Okay, so we've now entered our observers. So you always have to tell it what you're talking about. Okay, so 7B, and it's like, okay, yep, 7B, I'm on board. Okay, this survey, this one I just did. Now I've added Jenny McFarland and Olia Weekly. I have me and this unknown person, which would be the filler for Olia. Now, if they recorded weather, this is where it goes. I'd say about half the time, this weather thing is just left totally blank. And if it is, just leave it blank. So, so they did 6:01, 61 degrees. Okay, so 6:01, the time was 6:01. It was 68 degrees. The wind was a 0. The wind direction is not, this is another weird thing. Wind direction's in the system, but it's not on the cover sheet. So no one ever does wind direction because it doesn't ask them for it. So we're just skip it. Wind direction gets skipped. Clouds are a 0. Precipitation is a none. Insert. Okay, so they took a start weather and they also took an end weather. So we're going to put that 7:37 was 73 degrees. All right, and believe it or not, we're almost ready to enter birds. So you have to do these 2 steps before you even enter any birds. All right, so now this has now been set up. Now what this page is telling us some really important things that don't usually matter, but they might matter. If you ever need to tell me something that happened for a specific survey, it is telling you a survey ID code. This 11313338 is an auto-generated ID number for this particular survey, for the 7B T2 route on April 27th from 6:01 to 7:37 a.m. has been auto labeled that survey number. So, and look how it repeats. It's putting it with the observers. It's putting it with the survey. With the weather. So the weather record, and this is how Access works. It links things with ID numbers. So this survey has been given an auto ID number, and everything else is referencing back to it. Okay. So now we're ready to enter some birds. So what we're going to do is, depending on what's going on, so the next 5 of these are dependent on what kind of survey you have. The vast majority of them are going to be, at least for my backlog, but it's going to be different in the future. We've done a lot of transects in the past. We're moving towards doing sort of shifting everything over to point counts in the future. But if you have a transect, which is what we have here, and how we know we have a transect is going to the second page here. It says Arizona IBA transect survey on the data form that I, these are like set data forms that I print out for people or give them the file to print out, and then they fill it out with pen in the field. But because it says transect, we know we're in a transect. So we're going to do this option: enter data for transect, area search, supplementals, or casuals. Now the next one is point counts. If you had a point count, you would click this one, enter data for point counts. And the reason they're different is because the data sheet asks for slightly different things. So the interface is slightly different. But transect, area search, supplementals, and casuals all look the same on the data form, basically. So this, you click on that, and this is what it takes you to. And this is where we start entering birds. But once again, you have to tell it which survey you're talking about, because it's not going to assume. It really, Access does not guess for you, which is helpful. It's also kind of annoying, but it prevents mistakes, which is the main point. So we're going to go to 7B again. That's what we're talking about. Yes, it was this one. This one the most recent one that your login was talking about comes to the top. So 7B T2 survey number 1338. There it is again. I usually do it by the date though, April 27th. I select, and it turns it bright mango colored. So now you and the database are on the same page that we're talking about this survey. And now is when you can start entering birds. So our first bird is Lua, which is Lucy's warbler. It's an audio 1, 0 to 50, and it's singing. Okay. This is a little easier when you have the paper in front of you and the screen in front of you, but we're going to do both on the screen here. Okay. So now we know it's the same one. Like we have it, this one. Now, I think if I were to unselect, let me see how this looks unselect. Let's see if it'll unselect. Okay. So if you don't choose one and you try to do a bird, let me show you what it does. It won't let you, which is good. It shouldn't let you. Must enter account. Okay, one. This is just an example. It's going to be like, see how it turned red? Select survey before assigning. So it won't let you enter bird data unless you have selected a survey. Because otherwise it wouldn't be linked to anything, right? The database won't know what survey to put that Lucy's warbler with. So now we've selected the correct one. Our first bird was a Lucy's warbler. Now this system, you can pull down and look for your bird. You can, which can be helpful sometimes if you don't know the code. But if you do know the code, you can literally just start typing it. Let me put it on something else. So I selected it. I'm just typing LUWA, and it goes right to it. It does have a bit of a sticky keys kind of option, which gets really helpful when you're doing a lot of data entry. So now I'm going to hit enter on my keyboard, enter on the keyboard. Now it's selected it. I could also just click on Lucy's, and it also selects it. Was it an audio or a visual? And this is going to go through the same steps as a data form, which is really helpful. Oh, there it is. Okay. So Lucy, it was audio 1, 0 to 50. Lucy, it was audio. I'm going to type 1. Distance zone was 0 to 50. And they mentioned it was singing. So now singing is a breeding code. So see how it says here, breeding behavior, click on value below to add them. I'm going to click on S for singing on that pull. In this case, because of space, is the pull up menu. But now if they had written a comment, which they didn't, but if there was a comment here, like let's say carrying food, or I don't know, chasing another one, or some sort of comment, you would type it right here. It's pretty rare to have comments. They are helpful though when people do them. So let's double check. We got Lucy's audio 1, 0 to 50, singing. Somehow I got singing on there twice. Don't really want that. Well, let me fix it. Of course not. All right. So once you have that in, you hit insert. And it very helpfully puts it below here. So as we go to the next one, it'll start building them down, which is really nice, because then if you're like, did I already enter that one? It indicates to you that you did. So Suta, which is summer tanager, audio 1, 0 to 50, and they put a C in the comment, which means calling. This is something I need to update on the form. All right, so summer tanager, Suta, audio 1, 0 to 50. And they had a comment in here that it was calling. They had just had a C in the comment box. So remember that they just put a C here. Now that indicates calling, but you don't have to write all calling if they didn't. You can just put a C if you want, and we know what that means. Or you can do calling. you know, but the C means calling if they do that in the comment box. Insert, and then it takes a second, it inserts it. Now let's look at what it's done. It is now showing me the 2 records I did, and it's doing them in the order in which you enter them, with the newest ones below at the bottom. And it's telling us a couple things. There's that code again, 13338. So that's the survey site ID. Now it's generating another auto code, which is the site species ID. So this exact record of a Lucy's warbler with this survey has its own code as well. So if you're trying to tell me something like this is wrong, or I messed up, or this species doesn't exist or something, if you give me these numbers, this makes it so easy for me to find it. And I can find it other ways too. If you're like, oh, it was 7B, it was April 27th survey, I can still I can find it the long way that way. But these codes are an absolute shortcut to finding what's going on with something if you need to tell me something about a record. So let's do another one. Why did
Can I ask a question, Jenny?
Huh?
Can I ask a question?
Please.
Okay, so breeding behavior, singing was a breeding behavior, but why wasn't calling? It could have been a male, you know, like calling for, so how do you know when to put it in comments and when it's breeding behavior, unless you have the list memorized, I guess?
Right. So calling is not considered breeding behavior because they do it kind of all year. It's just a way for birds to communicate whether they're breeding or not. Again, this is kind of based on kind of old-fashioned natural history stuff. But if you look at this list of breeding behavior, there is a C, and it's for courtship. That's why it gets a little tricky. The C is courtship.
Gotcha.
So that's why I always tell them, put it in the comments. And then if anything, what I need to do is update this data form so that there's a place to check calling or something, so that it's more clear to them that I don't want them to write C in a breeding code. And in fact, I bet that's what happened here. Olia wrote C and then she crossed it out and put them over here because I told her, oh, no, C means courtship if you put it in that column.
Gotcha.
So that's what's going on there. Okay. Yeah, I know it's a bit weird. Okay. So the next bird here is going to be a Lucy's warbler again. Audio 1, 0 to 50, and that's it. They didn't write singing. They didn't write anything. Now that's a bit weird to me. If you heard it, how could you not have heard it calling? But we're going to do what they did. Okay. Sometimes I infer and I go through with my red pen like, hey, ding dongs, of course it was this. But I do it sometimes. It depends on what's going on. But I'm not going to do it in this case. I'm just going to do it straight up as they had it. So I typed in LUWA, Lucy's. It was an audio. It's a 1. It's 0 to 50. They didn't indicate anything else. Hit insert, and there it goes. All right, so here it is. So we have our unique codes for each of the bird sightings, and then they all are going to have the same site survey ID since they're all affiliated with the same survey. So that's the basics of how you do data entry. Now, if you were doing point count data, you would go through the same 2 steps. So let me pull up that point count example. We're not going to put anything in yet because I'm going to go out and delete these because I think one of you has this data, the 7B data. So I'll delete what I did so that you can enter the full survey. But so here's a point count example where they they're in San Rafael, Team 5, PC1. They have a start and end time at 6 minutes as it should be because it's a 6-minute point count. But anyway, point count works very similar where you do this main survey data entry step, and that's from the cover sheet. Where were they? They were in San Rafael. Who was there? What date was it? Then you do enter observers and weather. But then after you do the observers and weather, you go to the point count option, and it looks incredibly similar. It is slightly different though, and that's why it has its own link. So you would again pick a it has to be one I've actually entered point counts for. Simpson. No. Yeah, let's do Simpson. Simpson's fine. All right. So ones that I've entered point count for. So let's say then you select that, and it's going to work almost exactly the same way. One of the only differences and one of the only reasons we have this is a separate, you know, screen where it's a separate portal is because you pick your birds again. Lucy's warbler. Audio visual is the same. Total count's the same. But it has this structural difference of 0 to 5 and 5 to 10 minutes. So they're almost always 0 to 5. So because it has this slightly different options of selecting, which the data form will follow exactly. So this example data form here, 0 to 5. Oh, wait, no, it doesn't have 0 to 5. Well, okay. Point count has asked for slightly different things. It does things like audio and visual doesn't have a both. whereas transects do have a both. Like I both heard and saw it, not just one. Point count makes you pick one. It's just part of the protocol of point counts. So these slight differences is what's made it have its own link on the side, basically. Okay, so another really important concept with data entry is the supplementals idea. So when you get to the end of a survey, it's pretty common for people to put in extra birds, okay? So, or birds that were too far away. So looking through this data form, looking through this packet, you can see here, there's a column here. Let me zoom in a little bit. There's a column here that has distances, and this is distance bands that the birds are away from the counter, 0 to 50, 50 to 100 meters, 100 to 150, and then sup. So if a bird is too far away, it is a supplemental, okay? So literally sort of an extra bird, it's a supplement. So it's looking through here, and it doesn't look like the survey had any supplementals, but not have any. But if they had, you know, it is pretty dense in here. That's probably why the habitat's so dense. You're not getting anything further than 100 meters away. So if anything's supplemental, so looking through your own data packets, you may see stuff that's supplemental. You may see a squiggle line at the end of a survey and then extra birds that they wrote walking back. So let's see if this has any. So this one does. So this person's survey data from San Rafael has a supplemental indicated here. So they have a northern harrier that was supplemental. So what I do when I'm looking through a packet, so supplementals don't get entered in the normal spot. So we're putting in our Lucy's warblers that are associated with this transect, or all these different birds that are associated with this transect. If I were to put in supplementals here, it looks like they were part of the survey. I need them to be not part of the survey. They're supplemental. So how we handle those, and how I personally will do this, is I go through the data forms, and if there are supplementals, I hit them with a highlighter. You could do it with the red pen too. You could like circle them with the red pen. I usually just use like a green or yellow highlighter, or often pink. I highlight these supplemental birds to remind myself not to auto enter them when I'm putting in the other birds that are associated with the survey. So then supplementals go in at the very end, and how you handle that. And this is in that document I shared too about supplementals. It's like a note about data entry. It goes into this at great length, but supplementals have to be kept separate, and they get entered like this. Because they're supplementals, they're not really as, in terms of weight of value of data, they're not as weighty as like survey data. They're just sort of extra data. And I don't tell people to record huge amounts of supplementals. It's going to be interesting birds, maybe a new species. Oh, we didn't see one of those this morning. Write it down as we walk back, that kind of thing. So there shouldn't be that many, and sometimes there aren't any. But if there are some, what you're going to do is you go to this main, you sort of make it its own mini survey, and I'll show you what I mean. There's a location called supplemental in each of these spots. So you go to location 7B. 7B has a supplemental, almost as if it's its own survey route named supplemental. That's how we've logistically handled this. You go to supplemental, and you can see all these different times I've entered supplementals for 7B. And I tend to lump them. So the fact that if you had 2 survey packets in front of you from 7B on the same day from different teams, I lump them. If they're on the same day, I lump them together. If you're doing a series of point counts, I lump them together. So because it's real kind of casual. All right. So let's see, like we did number of observers. There was, let's say, 4 total people between the 2 surveys. It was 04. It was at 27. 2022. You know, maybe the start time for the whole, sort of the earliest time recorded by anybody and the latest time recorded by somebody, if you had multiple surveys kind of lumped together. So I tend to just lump all this up. Now, often, if you're just doing surveys where one team was out there, you're just going to have the supplementals for that one team's data. But if you had a whole crew of people, which can happen, especially like if you got any of that San Rafael or Las Ciénegas data that I sent out, that big packet with all the point counts in it, that is where it'd be really useful to just sort of put them all on one list at the end when you've highlighted them, and you just put them all in together with the same date. So then I sometimes may use a comment, but then you hit save survey record. Then you're going to go to enter data for transect area search supplemental. You're going to select 7B. You're going to select that supplemental that you created, and then just start entering birds as normal. So supplemental, you can think of it as kind of its own survey location, and it's kind of just a broad net for catching any of those extra birds that anybody recorded on that day and time. Now, sometimes it's just one survey you're pulling them from. Sometimes if there was a crew out there, it can be multiple surveys, and it's totally fine to just dump them all on the same supplemental list, because they don't add to the statistics at all. It's just sort of a thing capturing the fact that there are this bird was seen. So it kind of adds to the species list, but it's not that important. What's more important is just really trying to make sure you don't accidentally enter them as regular data on the transect or the point count. So one last thing I want to just cover real quick here in data entry, because I know we're running a little short on time, is when you're doing point counts. So, and because you're going to be seeing more point counts in the near future, because I'm really going to establish a bunch of new survey areas for people soon, and they're going to be mostly point counts just because they're more statistically helpful to us for tracking trends and data, is when you're doing point counts. So like in this example of San Rafael, this was something we did this very recently. So this is from just, last month, where I had crews out in San Rafael and I gave them a series of point counts I wanted them to do. And that's very common with point counts, is I stand on this spot for 5 minutes, exactly this location. Then I go 100 yards away or 200 meters away it's what's more normal. Stand on this spot for 5 minutes, record everything, then go 200 meters further, stand on the spot for 5 minutes, record everything. So that's real standard procedure for like tons of different conservation groups, and even in multiple countries. Like that's how it's a really common way to do bird surveys, is point counts. But the thing that gets the thing you have to keep in mind when you're doing data entry on point counts is every single point count is like its own survey. So this situation here that we're seeing on this data form, where they have a point count, they put the date, they named it Team 5 Transect 1, point count 1. Not the transect, sorry. There we go. Team 5 Tank 1, point count 1. When they did this, and they only recorded a few birds because it's only 5 minutes. It's the birds you're getting in 5 minutes. And then they have to go on to the next one, and they have a new start time and a new end time because it's a separate survey. Point counts are independent surveys of each other. Unlike a transect where you're taking an hour and a half to walk a trail and recording all the birds in a long series, which can get really nice when you're doing data entry because you're just putting in all these birds associated with the same survey. It's really convenient for data entry. Now it gets a little less, point counts are a little less convenient for data entry. It's not terrible, but it's a little less convenient in the sense that, let's just do a sample of this. I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to do San Rafael, Team 5. Okay. So main survey entry, San Rafael. Now, if you got San Rafael data, or if you got Las Ciénegas data, they're all going to be under this experiment heading. And that's because I was trying something new, and we probably won't do it again. And I didn't want it lumped in with all the long-standing routes. I can't remember if I wrote that on everyone's. I think I put maybe a Post-it note on those that said experiment. That
you have it in red on mine.
Is it in red on yours? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty important, because otherwise you're not going to find the one you're looking for. So whether it's San Rafael, and I think one person got Las Ciénegas maybe because one of the packets was illegible, so I did not send that one out. So San Rafael experiment, and then here's all the point counts. Right, because I just made this one, right? Okay, so everyone got Las Ciénegas, one person got San Rafael. Okay, so and I made sure these are all entered. So looking at this person's data, sorry, this is the data. They did Team 5, Tank 1, PC 1. All right. Team 5, Tank 1, PC 1. There it is. Tank 5, Tank 1, PC 1. Okay. Boom. It selected it. We're going to say the number of observers. What does it say? Now we know from the cover sheet there was 4 people there. Okay. Now, what I've decided to do as well is when you're doing point counts, you have to go through these first 2 steps over and over again, and it gets really annoying. So, what date was this? Oh, the cover sheet. What was the date? 2/4/23. Now, it's really important that date be selected, and this is a note I'm going to add to that new document I made on sort of a note about data entry. When you're doing a series of point counts, it's really important that the date be recorded for every single one, and the start and end time be recorded. So for this one here, this first point count, PC1, it was 9:19 to 9:25. 9:25. If there was I'm not going to worry about habitat. If there was a comment, if they'd written something, I have a notes thing here. If they'd written a comment about something, that's where you would go. And then we're going to hit save survey record. So I've decided that when you're doing a series of point counts, putting the names and the weather, names of the people and the weather only needs to happen once. Okay, so if this was the first point count you were entering for this packet, you would then go ahead and enter the observers and weather. Okay, but let's assume it's the second one. We're going to skip this step, and the system will let you do this. We're going to skip this step of observers and weather. We're going to go straight to enter data for point counts. We're going to go to San Rafael experiment, the one I just made, survey number 13340. We're going to select, and then I'm going to start entering my birds. Okay, so in this case, they only have a few birds. They have Savannah sparrow, they have northern harrier. So going through, entering these species, so let's do the first one, Savannah sparrow. It was what? They wrote A/V. Okay, point counts don't let you do that. You cannot do both. So whichever one they wrote first is what we're going to do. So audio, and that's where red pen comes into. Audio was 1, wasn't it 1? No, 8, 0 to 50. Okay, 8, 0 to 50. And that's all they recorded. So that's all we're going to do. We're going to insert, and then it goes. So let's say we've done this. We've entered all 6 of these birds. But then we're ready to enter our next point count. Because point counts are independent, we have to literally go through the steps of doing main survey entry again. Okay, so we have to tell it San Rafael, because this thing uses unflinching logic, the access system. It does not assume anything. It only knows what you tell it. So now we're on PC2. We're going to put in the 4 people, the date. What was it? It was 2. It's just last month. Is that right? Was it 23? I got cover sheet. What was the date? It was 2/4. Okay. 2/4/23. Start time on this PC2, right here, PC2, 9:28 to 9:34. All right, now they didn't have any comment. We're gonna hit save survey record. We're gonna skip this middle step since we're only gonna do it once per packet of point counts, because otherwise it's redundant. You're doing it over and over again. And I feel like that's too much burden on the data enterers. As long as we have it for the first one, I think that's fine. Who was there? Then you're gonna go back to point count. You have to tell it again because it does not assume, like it's kind of a good way. So experiment, this last one I just did. So see how now it's showing both the ones that we created, PC1 and PC2, but I'm entering data for PC2. Select, and then I can enter my birds. Okay. So that's the basics of how you do data entry. Now, weird situations can occur. Like sometimes people do area searches. It's pretty rare, but like some of the routes up near Prescott where they are cataloging all the ducks of a huge lake, they'll do area search because they can kind of stand with a scope and record everything. So those are pretty rare, but point counts and transects and then supplementals are the most common things that happen with us. So that's the base of that. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, and I am planning on having a second session if anyone wants to come to that again, if you want. Yes, go ahead.
I have one. You say point count. I look at my Lysinicus and it doesn't say it just says overall species list on route.
Okay. So there's a few.
That's a point count.
Yeah, if you keep going through, so because we were doing experimental stuff in Las Ciénegas and San Rafael, experimental in the sense that we've done a same protocol for many years and it's just not working well. So I'm working with another conservation group, a bigger group, to try to come up with a better way to survey. If you have a Las Ciénegas or San Rafael packet, there's going to be a few things that you're just going to ignore. The overall species route page, go ahead and ignore that. And then anything that has I think it's in my packet here, my sample packet. Any of these pages that are
but they have counts.
Right. So, but they're not transects and they're not point counts. And overall species.
Okay.
Is that something I have built into the system? I guess it could be a census. I could create a census. I'd have to put that in the system though, because right now in the pull down, well, let me go to Las Ciénegas. Right now in the pull down, I don't. That's the thing. A route doesn't exist for you to access unless I put it into the system. If that makes sense. So guess it could be an area search. All right, so Los Angeles experiment. Oh, I know what the problem is. Okay. Los Angeles experiment surveys. So these are all the ones I created. Okay, so that's part of the reason I kept it separate too, because I was having people do a million little surveys because we're really trying to get at a good way to survey chestnut colored longspurs. It has not been working well over the last 8 years for us and for much bigger conservation groups too, like Bird Conservancy of the Rockies. No one's having good luck getting these guys into data well. So I'm trying different things and we're going to confer anyways, but that's the background. That's why this has happened. And so I put in a bunch of tanks and point counts and the transects for you guys, but I can go ahead and put in sort of the overall bird list, and then you can go ahead and enter those, which would be really helpful. So I will do that. I will have to add that. Let me make a note to myself. I will have to add that into the database system. And in fact, I was going to show you guys, if anyone has to go, please, you won't offend me. Go ahead and go because I'm still recording. But I wanted to do a brief database tour, and you know what? A good way to do that is to do this. So there's team 1 through 5, and we're going to do an overall bird count. Oh, your example there. What's the name? Like on the cover sheet, what team is it?
Los Angeles. Team 4.
Team 4. All right, we're going to do a team 4 all bird count because most of the teams didn't even fill that out because most of them did it on eBird. But so let me show you what I mean. Okay, so I already have this set up. So where all this data is going when we enter data and we query data and pull it out, this is the mothership. Okay, so what I've done here is this is a remote connection. This is not my work computer that we're looking at. This is a remote connection using TeamViewer to a server that lives in the Tucson Audubon Nature Shop. That is a very powerful server computer that has multiple bird survey databases living on it. So this one here is the Tucson bird count, having nothing to do with what we're talking about today, but they both share space on this server. This is the IBA one. So this little icon here with the key is what Access looks like. So if you've ever seen Access as a program, that's what it looks like. And here it is. This is Access. Okay, so this thing has a bunch going on. So we are going to, right now, I'm going to add that in. LU site. So these are all, go away, thing in my way. This is all of the different surveys that have ever been established. This is where they live. And this is what this is the table that the online system is talking to. So let's go find one of those Los Angeles ones, and I'm going to base it on that. I want to make sure, right? So here it is, LCN. Hey, stop it, shoot. Go away. Okay, so LCN experiment. That's how it knows it's that experiment one. All right, so we're just gonna. It's you said team 4. So let's take a team 4 one.
Yeah.
So what this will do is then it will show up in that pull down for you after I'm done making this. Okay, team 4. What's it say on the data sheet? It says overall species, right?
It says, yes, overall species. And then you crossed out on route. Overall species list. And then, it says tank 2, actually.
Oh, I think that might have been one of the packets. People did it really weird and we're using the wrong data forms for stuff. Okay, but just I'm just going to do this anyway. So this is going to be a area search. Transect 1. We're going to call this overall species. So if anyone has an overall species, because that was a data form they could fill out. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then, just like the online system, once I've clicked out of it, it has saved it. Okay. So I just want to show you the 2 tables. So these are lookup. LU means lookup. This is how it was organized 15 years ago by someone who was very cleverly set this up very, very effectively. But there's a lot of tables in here, and LU are the ones that look up. So these are the ones that generate the pull downs in terms of what species, what locations, what areas. But the ones that are called table is the ones the data goes into. So table site survey, go to the very end. It shows us. Yeah, I thought maybe Jill was in here entering data because the numbers were skipping. So the one we did, 7BT2 from April 27th, 2022, here it is showing. I don't know why the times are weird. Go look at that. But T2, 2 people, And it's that same code we kept seeing over and over again, 13338. And that's what's happened is it's generated it here, and the website was interfacing with that. All right, so table site survey. In fact, I'm going to leave this open. This can be helpful to see them together. And then there's table site species, and this is where all the birds go. When you're entering data, this is where they end up. So we did 13338. Someone else is in here entering data, which is why. Order. But so the site survey that it's associated with, 1339 in this case, because this is, I think Jill's been entering data. But then that auto-generated bird species ID is here, the 4-letter code of the bird, and then everything you entered in, total count, distance zone, whatever, here it is getting recorded. So that's where the data goes, is into this system. But you can see here, it's not the most intuitive interface you've ever seen. It can be a little tricky to deal with, but it is powerful in the sense that I can go in here and change anything. So if there's a mistake or something isn't working right, I can go in here and change it directly. I do know how to use Access pretty well, so that gets pretty good. Now, there's one more thing I want to cover real quick, is that's edit species record. When we were entering main survey stuff, there was a blue edit link right there at the bottom where you could edit something directly. We don't have that in the species. What we decided to do instead was make it its own link here on the left that says edit species records. You click on that, you go to what you're talking about. Okay, 7B, that T2, and here they all are showing for you. And if you're like, oh, I wasn't a Lucy's warbler, that was a Wilson's warbler, you hit edit and you can change it. Okay, you can change it yourself. We added a lot of power in here and we did this pretty recently, for the data enterers to be able to do some of their own changes. So if you need to change a species, this is how you do it, is here in this edit species records link. Select your data, and it's only going to show you the surveys that were entered by you under your login. So it won't show you anyone else's stuff that they entered, just yours, which is nice because you can't accidentally get confused and change someone else's data. And so that's how you can. Now, the one thing we didn't put in here in terms of, we thought it was a little too dangerous to put it in an online interface, is the delete option. So if something needs to be deleted, if you accidentally entered something twice, we thought delete might get crazy if someone hacked in and just start deleting stuff. So we don't have it on the web. We could have, but we didn't. So if you need to delete something, I need to go in, but it's easy for me to do. I can remote in from anywhere I am and go into the system here. You know, what we're looking at, this system here, this server, and open the database itself, and I can go ahead and delete anything you need to. Now, the last thing I like to show, because I think it's kind of fun, is this is the table of site species. It starts at 1. The very first bird that was ever entered into this database was a loggerhead shrike. And it's kind of fun. But how many are in here? We are now on 233,000 birds that have been entered. And it's actually, because some have been deleted in the past, it's actually 226,000 records, 950 records. So that's a lot of records that live in this database, and boy, do I back it up every month. Let me tell you, this is where the data lives. If the web interface just talks to this file basically and puts data in it, and I create backups every month on it. So the data is kept safe in that sense. Okay, so I am going to do this again, and if there's anything glaring I missed, I might end up doing a separate video. But this is going to be definitely a video that I'll put online. I don't know if I'll make it available to the public or not, but you guys will all get the link on this. And if I have to share it with other partners that do data entry, I'll also perhaps share the link. And when I do the next, I'm going to do this again for anybody who couldn't be at this meeting. Plus, I'll invite everybody. So if you want to attend, it'll be pretty much this again. But does anyone have any questions right now?
Just curious. Excuse me. The ones that you sent me, there's one dated 2018. It was at TV Loop or whatever.
Yeah.
Is this actual data that has
Yes.
never been entered?
Yes, that's Brian Nicholas's
Wow.
data. Brian is so prolific. He does like 6 surveys a year. He's done them for years. And I've gotten most of his most recent data has all been entered. But I'm finally getting towards the end of this backlog. So that's why you have the 2018 data.
Wow.
And The reason I sent you that one too is that first page, Brian has pretty challenging handwriting. He's a terrific
Yes,
birder.
I was going to ask about that.
Uh-huh. But his partner, I think Paul may have been with him. Someone who was with him did the pages of the birds, and they have excellent handwriting. So that gets a lot easier. Now, the ones that where Brian wrote them all, I tend to enter those myself, or I have someone who's really good at reading his handwriting too. His handwriting gets challenging.
But I noticed that, I couldn't read his email, but that wasn't a data entry point.
No,
we don't have to enter the
you don't
email,
have to enter that.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to enter that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I know Brian, so I know what it is. It's Weehawker too at Yahoo, but he's such a good birder, but he's got like doctor's chicken scratch writing. And
yeah,
but whoever was birding with him, who had the clipboard, has much clearer writing. So that should go pretty well doing the birds. So yeah, if you, I suggest you try some of that data entry. If you have any questions, please feel free to call me or text me at my cell number. I can't remember if I've given you my cell number before, but Jill Kellerman, who does a lot of data entry for me, she texts me a couple times a week with a question or a photo of the data line. Like, Jenny, what does this say? That kind of thing. That's totally great. I totally encourage that. I like that kind of communication. So please feel free to do that. And stop sharing.
What is your cell number?
It is 520-360-2213, and I'll also put it in the follow-up email. Yeah, that's a good question.
And so this is data that you want us to go ahead
that's
and
real data
for real.
Yep, all the packets I sent out are actual data. And I need sort of information from everyone on sort of the way you prefer to get more data. Is no problem to mail it, but if people want to pick it up or have me send them a scan of it, whatever you prefer, I can absolutely do that. It's so helpful to me that the data get entered that I will happily mail you packets of data. And I can even do, I don't have to have the data back, but I prefer to have it back because I do keep it in a file. I keep it in filing cabinets here at Tucson Audubon. But I also, any data I mail, any data that leaves my possession, I always take digital scans of it. So if something happens to the data, it's not the end of the world. It's fine. I keep digital versions of everything. But for now, anyway, traditionally, we've always kept the paper data. And some people have suggested I should stop doing that, but I haven't made that jump yet. So for now, I am keeping the paper data. So it occurred to me I should have included a self-addressed envelope to send it back, or at least like a stamp in there. I'll do that in the future. If I mail you data, I'll make sure there's a stamp in there to get it back. Because it's easy for me to just print too at our little postage system. But yeah, so for when you're done with the data and you want more, just let me know. I can send you some. And we are about to start, which is why I've recruited you all to be the additional data enterers, is I'm about to make a big push to have a lot more surveys happening. So we're going to have more data coming in. So the data, we still have a little more catch up to do, some of that old data, but a lot of it I had an intern do last summer, do a lot of data entry. But I still have some of the old backlog, but most of what's going to be happening from now on is going to be new data.
When we save it, do you get notification that it's been saved?
If I looked, I don't get a ping or anything. I don't get a notification, but if I look in the system, so in this, do I still have it open? I must have closed it. That when we're looking in the database and looking in those tables that look really sort of a lot of letters right there, as you enter data, it will appear there if I open that file. And I could see as we were doing our demonstration, I could tell, and it must be Jill because she's the only one I know is doing data entry right, this week. The numbers were skipping for me as I was doing mine. So as I was entering data, like it went for on this, let me share my screen. The example's still up. On the example here, the site species ID went from 233290 to 95. It went from 90 to 95. That tells me someone else is entering data because it's skipping numbers, because it auto generates them as they come in, and it does it in sequential order. So she entered, 4 birds in between me entering these 2. So, and it's in the sense, I don't get a notification that data has been entered, but if I were to look, I could see that it's been entered. Yeah.
But what if, even if I review what I entered before I hit save, but there's still a mistake, how do you know about it?
You'd have to contact me. Now, some of the mistakes you can edit. So you could, if I'm here in this species records, but if you were here in main, so some of the mistakes that can happen, you are able to fix yourself. So let's say you go to T2 or what, the one you did, you can hit edit and change things and then update it, and it automatically updates in the database. But
Okay.
if you need to delete something, that's the one part that we don't make available online, just for security reasons. So if you have to delete something, you would just contact me, and you're free to email me or text me. Text me is probably the best way to get a hold of me quickly, or call me. But and that's how Jill does it, and that works really well. She'll be like, Jenny, I need you to delete record 1338, and it takes me just a minute to log in and do it, and then just delete it. So a lot of the things you can fix yourself, but if you can't, that's where contacting me is the way to get it fixed.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I hope that makes sense. I know it's a bit much, and the thing is, the more you do it, it gets a lot quicker. And one other thing I want to just mention real quick is when you're doing data entry, if you're anyone who's used to ever doing sort of keystroke data entry, you'll sort of get the sense that a lot of this will let you do a fair amount of keystroke. So let's say we're entering, this is that first example we have, the 7B, the one that had like this one here that had like, what was it, like 7 pages of data. This is a very birdy area. I did this survey, and it's a lot of this. So Modo, Lucy's warbler, Bell's vireo, Lucy's warbler, a lot of the same birds over and over again, that when you can get into a keystroke pattern. There you go. You get into a keystroke pattern of once you've selected the right one. And so you can do Lua type. So I'm not touching my mouse at all. I did Lua, typing it, I hit enter. Now you have to use your mouse at first to select that you're doing a bird. So when you do your first pull down, you have to use the mouse for that. But Lua, enter. And then if I hit tab key, it goes right to audio visual. I'm gonna use the key A for audio, tab to count 1, tab. So I usually do those first 3, just the keyboard, and it can go, once you start to know the codes, it goes fast. So now that I've gotten everything in here, if they had a breeding code or something, then I have to use the mouse to select that. And then you have to hit insert, has to be a mouse. You can't hit enter on that. So you click insert. And then usually while it's thinking for that half second, I'm looking at the next one. I click on this. Let's say it's Bell's vireo, bevy, tab, visual. I hit the V, tab, key, hit 1, tab. Now, and then I have to hit tab twice because estimated is an option. If they check estimated, you just click estimated. Then I go to distance zone. I'm going to do 1 for 0 to 50, tab. And then you can sort of tab through the fields, and that gets really fast. Is when you start doing data. I remember the first time I started doing this, I was so slow. I was right out of college. I'm like pulling down to every bird, and then by day 3, you're just like just typing stuff in, because it does actually get a lot faster. So that seems like kind of slow when you're showing someone how to do it, but it gets a lot faster over time when you can sort of start using the sticky keys, typing in the code. Another thing, when you're putting in the 4-letter codes for Lucy's warbler or something, if you hit the wrong key, it does have like a 2-3 second delay before it forgets what you did. And then you can like, oh no, I didn't mean, I did. If you get the first letter wrong, you have to wait. Maybe it's about 2 seconds, I think, before you can then, it refreshes and you can start typing in a different one. And if I don't know the code, let's say I'm like, okay, I know it's canyon wren, but I don't know, these idiots didn't write the code. They wrote the whole word canyon wren. I don't know what the code for that is. If you do any wren, if you do cactus wren, it'll get you right near the wrens. And so then the pull down is in phylogenetic order. So if I can't remember, if I don't know the code for a warbler, I'll do the code of a warbler I do know, and now I'm in the warblers, and I can use the mouse to go to the correct warbler. So that's another, I think, thing that I do a lot that I think is pretty helpful. All right, so I will send a follow-up email on this, and we'll schedule a second session of this so that those who want it can attend again. And I am looking out my window in my office, and like 100 cedar waxwings are flying around. I'm not even kidding.
Oh, nice.
Oh, there's so many this year, I can't even believe it. They've been hanging out here in the Tucson Audubon front yard for like 2 days because there's a bunch of fruiting palms in this block, and they're sitting on the roof of the building right now. Oh, look at them go. Oh, anyway, it's been amazing. I love this. I keep entering eBird lists. I need to do another one in a second here of all these waxwings. But you guys were a wonderful audience. I'm sorry we did go 90 minutes. I do apologize for that, but it's a lot to explain. But I hope you understand. And when that sort of directions document, I'm going to flesh that out a bit more.
All right, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. You're very, very patient, and you guys are doing the good work. Data entry is some of the most important part of this whole thing, because I get piles of data, and if I don't enter it, it might as well not have happened, right? So
exactly.
Yeah. So I really
thanks, Jenny.
Yeah, thank you all
so
much.
Thank you, Jenny.